Thank you, everyone, for staying with us here for our final session, session 6 on day 3. This session is focused on integrative pedagogical methods. I am Patty Kubo, professor in comparative international education in the Department of Ed Leadership Policy Studies, as well as curriculum instruction at IU, Indiana University School of Education here in Bloomington. And we are in partnership with Dr. Ilham Nasser and her colleague Saulat Parvez at the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT. I would also like to introduce to you Darya Dogan, who is our graduate assistantship and a symposium assistant as well on our leadership team. And she is at IU School of Education in Ed Policy program, as well as in our Hamilton School of Global and International Studies with her joint degree focused on Middle Eastern languages and cultures. So for those that have stayed, you know who we are by now. Some join, and that's why we do these little introductions each time. Okay, I'm excited to be able to introduce our chair of this session, which is Dr. Yusuf Oratiji. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Oratiji. And he will be introducing himself as well as the 4 total panelists and their titles for our session 6. Thank you.
Hello everyone, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to session 6, integrative pedagogical models. In this session, you will first listen to me about a proposal for knowledge and emotion-based musical practice for religious education. My name is Yusuf Ziya Öğretici, by the way. You see my affiliation to the University of Glasgow, Scotland, UK, but it's changed. Last month, I defend and complete my PhD, and you can call me doctor right now.
Oh, congratulations. We will definitely add that to the program, Yusuf, okay? To indicate, because by the time you're doing this presentation, it's official.
Okay, thank you. After me, Jalal Nakam from Ibn Tufayl University in Morocco will present about flipping grammar in Moroccan high schools, a mixed method approach. After that, the presentation will be about the effect of language of instruction on students' performance, evidence from Arab states. It will be presented by Dr. Dania Samali Bouhila and Dr. Ayman Hentati from the University of Tunis Al-Manar in Tunisia. And the last will be Dr. Fatih Ahmediye from the Hashemite University in Jordan. He will discuss about children's electronic games. How developmentally appropriate are they? I think we can start.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll now start the videos.
Hello everyone. Today we will talk about knowledge and emotion-based musical practice for religious education. It is widely supposed that there is a suitable and vital role for music in religious education. However, the answer to the question of how music should be included in the teaching of RE remains uncertain. The hypothesis within this study is that music, with its capabilities to stimulate emotions and facilitate the communication of knowledge, can enhance religious education by fostering students' meaning-making process owing to their emotional and cognitive engagement with the classroom subject. Then the premise of the current paper is that music and RE are related in various aspects. This study develops a distinctive theoretical foundation for the concepts of musical emotions and communication of knowledge with music for the context of RE. It is argued since Al-Farabi that Turkish music can induce predetermined specific emotions due to its makams. To assess the historical claims for inducing predetermined emotions via Turkish makam music, I conducted an experiment utilizing the Geneva Emotional Music Scale to measure listeners' emotional response to selected 12 excerpts. The aim is to adopt an experimental approach in order to assess the claims for inducing predetermined emotions via music in favor of implications for educational benefits. In a provocative sense, it could be argued that if one is required to induce particular emotions, she can use music for the sake of their educational advantages. Then it would be comprehensible that Turkish makam music might be beneficial for education to the extent that it can induce expected emotions. GEMS has 9 factors listed on the left column. Each has 2-3 sub-items rated by the participants. By comparing the historical emotional attributions for makams and GEMS factors, each excerpt was expected to induce, therefore, to get higher ratings for a particular GEMS factor that is highlighted by green on the table. In addition, for the excerpts, blue figures give the highest factor score, while yellow figures indicate the lowest factor score. Accordingly, the match of green and blue in a cell tells that the excerpt has a very high intensity to induce the intended emotions. There are 3 success categories. First, the successful excerpts with the significant correspondence between the intended emotion factor and the highest factor score, highlighted by red on the table. For Buselik, Sabah, Hüseyni, Rast, and Neva, there is a noticeable correspondence between the intended emotion factor and the highest factor score. Hence, these excerpts are successful in evoking the intended emotions. Second, the partially successful excerpts, the intended factors are not the highest among the GEMS factor of the respective excerpt, but it is higher than the aggregated mean value of the respective GEMS factor for all excerpts. For Irak, Nihavend, Segah, Isfahan, and Zerefken, there is a partial success. Accordingly, these excerpts can stimulate the intended emotions to some extent. Third, the not successful excerpts, Mahur and Hijaz, are not successful in evoking the intended emotions. However, it doesn't mean these excerpts do not have an emotional response from the sample, but means that those responses are not in accordance with the expectations of the study. Accordingly, it is found as predicted that Turkish makam music is successful in inducing particular predetermined emotions. After that, I explored the place of music in RE from the perspective of education professionals through the semi-structured interviews. Using a grounded research strategy, I formulated a theory to explain the present situation and offer suggestions for improving the use of music in RE. The findings are reported in 4 areas. First is the standards for musical material. This includes the strategies of legitimation and disapproval of music, reasoning for using music in RE, and features of proper musical material. Second is the characteristics of the RE teacher, students, and the place of musical activities in RE. After that, the theoretical and practical considerations for musical interventions in RE are illustrated. This relates to the manifest and latent levels of musical activities and the values education approaches. In this view, the manifest level of the activities is extended from the basic activities such as listening and singing to talent-oriented activities like composing and choir works. The latent level of the activities implies that these activities shall be conducted for emotional responses, cognitive activation, or behavior promoting. Hence, in terms of the values education approaches, the musical activities might be emotion-based for inductive approaches, knowledge-based for deductive approaches, and alternately for mixed approaches. Last, it is proposed a collaboration between the partners of the education realm. While teachers do not have convenient support for the musical activities in RE in the current situation, academic, organizational, art-based, and local cooperation may boost the outcomes of the musical interventions. One of the significant outcomes of this research has been confirming that the role of teacher is the key to the musical interventions in the context of RE. However, it is evident that RE teachers require substantial support to improve the quality of musical activities in the RE classroom. Nonetheless, there are attainable opportunities in the current situation for using music to enlarge the education outcomes of RE. The principal question of the present paper was, how should music, with its capacity to induce emotions and to facilitate the communication of knowledge, be included in the teaching of RE? To answer this question, I explored first how do listeners emotionally respond to Turkish music when they listen to it, and then investigate how do RE professionals evaluate the place of music in religious education. Now I merge both perspectives in line with the literature to present guidance for conducting musical activities for RE classes. This figure illustrates the foundations for musical interventions for religious education classroom with 4 agents and 8 interactions. The central position of the teacher is not only just visual in the figure. This is because the teacher is the independent factor in the teaching and learning environment, to the extent that she can coordinate other agents so that better learning outcomes can be attainable. However, the relationships between the dependent agents are reciprocal, and the teacher's relation with this is one way. These agents are dependent because they are affected by other agents, owing to the interactions among music, listener, environment, and teacher. Dependent agents, students, For the purpose of the current paper, students must be in the RE classroom to respond to musical activity. The response requires students' active emotional and cognitive engagement with the musical material. For this reason, individual characteristics that influence feeling and cognition must be considered during the activity. Although musical talent is not a core requirement for race education, some musical activities, such as choral works, demand basic skills. Music, the educational affordances and possibilities of race education were the chief concern. To engage the students in a complex thinking, feeling process that can be directed towards non-musical educational goals, the focus in the present paper is not principally on the music itself. Rather, in the context of RE, music is viewed to another end, namely educational outcomes rooted in the purpose of race education. The musical excerpt is employed in the classroom with its emotional and cognitive qualities, so that feeling and cognition will be adequately included in the teaching and learning process. The musical excerpt that enhances the communication of knowledge, inducing emotions, and expressing emotions is relevant material for the musical activities. Classroom is not only a place between the walls, it is where the musical activities of race education are conducted. Each class is designed to attain the educational outcomes of the curriculum. There's a purpose in teaching subject for the students to reach at the end of teaching and learning process through the musical activities. Hence, its context and conditions are more important than its physical dimensions, because the RE classroom, which uses music, is situated in this context. Having said that, the wider implications of classroom conditions are worthy of comment. Interactions between the dependent agents, emotion induction, knowledge expression, and emotional and cognitive response to music. Learning is commonly understood as the acquisition of knowledge and skills. However, it is also related to emotions, attitudes, and beliefs. For musical stimuli, there are emotional and cognitive expectations. These expectations are integral to the function of music in RE. The expectations are chiefly that when students listen to musical stimuli, they will perceive emotions, knowledge-based, and emotionally respond to the music with felt emotions, feeling-based. Furthermore, the musical excerpts is subject to students' cognitive inquiry, cognition, and thereby music will facilitate the communication of knowledge. Oppositeness of music to the context. The interactions between music and the features of the situation are of foremost importance in explaining the emotional and cognitive response to music. The relationship between music and classroom conditions indicates that stimuli of certain genres, styles, and performance contexts might be seen as relevant or irrelevant according to varying features of particular listening conditions. Situated experience of students. The value of responding to music in race education is defined in relation to the context situation in which students and teachers are engaged with the activity. To enhance meaning-making process in the race education classroom with musical interventions, the relationship between music and students must be considered within the social cultural context. Independent agent, teacher. Owing to her independent and authoritative position, the teacher can engage and evaluate everything in the musical activity environment of race education. Yet, this is not on his or her own whims, but to boost the benefits for the students. The teacher has the authority to control, change, and adjust the parameters related to the students, the musical activity, material, and the environment. Nonetheless, the teacher can be indirectly affected by the other dependent factors. Hence, in return, the teacher carries the main burden of responsibility. If the musical activity offers a better way to teach a subject, there is a moral and professional responsibility for teachers to use that method. Unfortunately, they do not consistently find effective support for developing musical interventions. Even deciding whether to use music in the first place must be contemplated carefully by the teachers. Hence, in schools, some tend to become a group of enthusiastic early adopter individual leaders of the teaching and learning environment. This requires combining the expertise in the subject field, pedagogy, and at least a basic awareness of musical culture. However, it then needs wider infrastructure and support. The teacher plans the musical activity of race education, including finding proper material, conducting the activity, and its measurement and assessment. In this plan, the teacher must comply with the targets set by the curriculum, to which musical activities might be of assistance. However, in this process, the teacher must consider the students' characteristics and the features of the classroom subject. In other words, the connection between the subject, music, and students' roles and aptitudes may vary. For instance, in terms of emotional and cognitive capacities, the teacher establishes a partnership with the students for a better learning environment. where the students are not expected to discover alone the links between the musical activity and the subject. This research investigated important questions surrounding the ongoing debates of emotions in education, music in Ari, music in Islam, and various education within the Ari context. Navigating this complex matrix of interrelated and overlapping questions in the manner undertaken here clearly demonstrate that for the development of students' feelings, cognition, and behaviors, the presence and the practice of musical activities in Ari classrooms can indeed offer a constructive and inspiring transformation experience in the study of various education. Even though this potential is for the most part still underutilized in the present era. And thank you.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for this interesting conference. My topic is flipping grammar in Moroccan high schools, mixed method approach. So before I start, I would like to say some words about me. So my name is Jilani Naqam, 40 years old. I am a high school teacher. I've been teaching for 10 years. Fourth year PhD student. My field of interest is flipped classroom and critical thinking. I've got one publication, which is the evaluation of reading comprehension questions in Moroccan ALT textbooks. As you can see from this title of this publication, I am really interested in integrating critical thinking and modernizing our educational system here in Morocco. So the main components of this presentation are the introduction, research questions, the research problem, the review of literature, methodology, finding, and conclusion. Now let's start with the introduction. I will give a short definition of flipped classroom. So flipped classroom is a modern approach to education that incorporates flipping traditional instruction outside the classroom walls. What conventionally takes place in class has become a homework activity. Class time is allotted to participatory activities of discussions and problem solving. Now, in a traditional classroom, teachers have the upper hand of what is going on in class. They explain lecture, so they dominate the class time, which is most of the time is limited. Whereas students are just the passive learners. They consume what is taught to them. But in a flipped classroom, the roles of teachers and students are reversed. So students are more active agents in the learning process, and teachers, they just guide and facilitate the learning process. This will lead us to talk about a very important learning theory, which is constructivism. So constructivism is the theoretical underpinning of flipped classroom. And of course, it is the theoretical framework of this paper and presentation. According to this theory, a flipped classroom consists of two phases. Phase number one is content attainment phase, which takes place at home. At this stage, students gain a conceptual understanding of the subject matter at home. And at this stage, self-directed learning is emphasized. And in the second phase, which is the concept application phase, students put into practice what have been learned at home. At this stage, students are engaged engaged and are encouraged to participate in active in activities such as discussions and debating and problem solving and stuff. Okay. Now, a flipped classroom is based on Bloom's taxonomy. As you can see in this pyramid, in a traditional classroom, the low thinking skills are dealt with in the class, and those skills which can trigger students' thinking, such as analyzing, evaluating, and creating, are done at home. Whereas in a flipped classroom, the opposite takes place. The low order thinking skills are done at home, and the high thinking skills, such as the analysis, evaluation, and creation, are activities which are encouraged in classroom with the guidance or under the guidance of the instructor. This will lead us to talk about the research problems. So two main questions are meant to be answered in this study. So number one, what is the impact of flipped classroom instruction on students' grammatical competence? And second one, what are students' perceptions toward flipped classroom instruction? Now let's discuss the research problems. So as you know, communicative language teaching, which was developed to improve learners' communicative skills, has failed to meet intended objectives, which is mainly learners are not given the opportunity to use the language effectively in class. So class time is dominated by instructors who lecture and explain lessons, while students sit passively and consume what is poured in their heads. So in grammar lessons, which are dominated by rules, teachers spend most class time emphasizing the correct uses of the language, which might become boring and worthless if learners are not given the chance to communicate and interact with each other. For that reason, we propose flipped classroom as a way to engage students and make grammar lessons very interesting for students. Okay, now let's move to the following part, which is the review of literature. So this part is divided in two sections. The first section, which is discusses the effect of flipped classroom on students' performance. Flipped classroom impacted positively on students' performance in grammar. Here I can mention the study of Wood in 2017 and Nabi to 2020 and Bazazi. In some other studies, they found that, for example, with Harbi and Shumaymiri 2016, they found that there is no difference, no significant difference between flipped classroom and non-flipped classroom on students' achievement. Of course, these studies are very limited because, in general, flipped classroom is found to be very effective. As for the second section, students' perception of flipped classroom, generally students had positive attitudes towards flipped classroom pedagogy. They appreciated being exposed to videos or documents at home before they come to class. We can find that in some studies that the level of satisfaction among students increases. Also, the students' active participation in the learning process also increases, as we have the example here from a study by McLaughlin 2014. Now, let's talk about the methodology. So, as for the research design, we adopted a post-test only quasi-experimental research. The participants and sit in two intact groups from two different high schools in Larache participated in studies. So Larache is a small city in north of Morocco, and it is a seaside city. The study included 40 high school students. The procedures includes the use of the ICT tools in both groups. The control group, traditional in nature, were taught by the researcher who used PowerPoint data show projector to explain the lesson content, and the experimental group were provided with a video that includes the lesson content and PDF documents. Exercises 3 days before the class time. Now, as for the data collection, two instruments were used, the post-test and the semi-structured focus group interview. The statistical, for the data analysis, statistical descriptive analysis was used to compare the means of the two groups in the post-test, and a qualitative content analysis was used to analyze the interview data. Now, let's move to the results. The means of the control and experimental groups are 1395 and 1415, respectively. As we can see here, that experimental group achieved better than the control group, and to examine these scores statistically, we used the independent sample t-test, and we set the level of significance at 0.05. As you can see here from the results, the significance is 0.660, which is higher than 0.5. So we concluded that the results are not significantly different. So and we concluded also that this may be attributed to the adoption of the ICT tools in both groups, or maybe there are other factors which we really don't know. Maybe it has to do with the level of students, or maybe it has to do with other factors which are really were not controlled, because we use this methodology or use this pedagogy only for once. So it's very hard to get a reliable results about the use of this pedagogy in our context. Now, as for the results of the interview group, generally the participants were satisfied with the use of flipped classroom. They said that it provided them with more time to prepare for the class activities and to work on their own pace. Flipped classroom gave them the chance to use the language in class. It also enhanced skills of active learning, such as autonomy and engagement. Now, as for the conclusion and recommendation, we concluded that integrating technology, information in education has the potential to impact positively on students' academic achievements. And it has been recommended that teachers should diversify their teaching methods by adopting innovative pedagogies with the objective of making students active agents in the learning process. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hi, our research study is titled The Effect of the Language of Instruction on Students' Performance, Evidence from Arab States. So the presentation will be structured as follows. After a short introduction to the rationale for our study, we will address the research question, followed by a brief review of the literature. Following that, we will present the data and methodology that were employed. The findings will then be highlighted, and finally, we will conclude. So let's start with introduction. Policymakers are mandating that students begin studying a foreign language at a younger age. Because of its dominance as a global language, English is frequently used as this foreign language. In regard to the association between language acquisition and age, there are two strands of literature. The first emphasizes on early age as an important predictor in foreign language success and highlights the benefits of the immersion programs in acquiring a second language. The second points to the concerns attached to early foreign language learning. These are stated as follows. First language acquisition is a process that takes a minimum of 12 years. Learning another language before completely mastering the previous language might have a negative impact on the native language or both the native language and the second language. In addition, being foreign language instruction early could negatively affect children's motivation and attitude toward foreign language learning and increase language anxiety. It's worthy to note that most previous research studies focused on East Asia and more precisely on China, and rare are those studies which focused on Arab states. In addition, most research in this area has focused on the development of language skills in terms of vocabulary, written English, and spoken English. Other studies focused on cross-linguistic transfer between the native language and the second language. According to the linguistic interdependence hypothesis, a second language competence is partly dependent on the level of competence already achieved in the first language, and that second language exposure can have detrimental effects on first language development. However, the issue which investigates students' ability to perform academically better or not on standardized tests administered in a second language was rarely debated. To fill this gap in the literature, in particular for the Arab states, we propose in the present investigation to evaluate the effect of language of instruction, English in this case, versus Arabic, on student achievement in mathematics and science as measured by TEAMS 2019 evaluation. More precisely, we seek to answer the following question. Does English instruction at the primary level affect students' learning outcomes in mathematics and science? A growing number of studies have shown that non-English-speaking students learn better in their native language, particularly prior to achieving functional competence in English. Some studies argued that language fluency influences positively mathematics achievement. Others showed that students who received their instruction in a second language, English instead of Chinese, experienced lower achievements than native students. And other studies highlighted the fact that students who took TEAMS evaluation in a second language are the most disadvantaged. Moreover, it's widely discussed in the literature that children's academic achievement is positively linked to socioeconomic status variables such as parents' education and educational resources at home. For the purpose of our study, we used the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study TEAMS 2019 data. TEAMS is a curriculum-based evaluation which was established to improve the teaching and learning of mathematics and science in school systems around the world through a comparison of the curricula and practice of different countries and to relate this information to the performance of their students. The sample of countries used is composed of Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Qatar, and 2 benchmarking participants, which are Abu Dhabi and Dubai. The reason for choosing these countries is twofold. First, because our focus is on Arab states, and second, only in these Arab countries, the students participating in TEAMS assessment at the primary level, that is grade 4, took the tests in Arabic and English. The data was merged, resulting in 9,970 pupils taking part in the TEAMS 2019 assessment with a mean age of 9 years old. All students were native speakers in Arabic. The outcome variables are students' achievements in mathematics and science. The central and dependent variable in this study is the language of instruction, English versus Arabic. Covariates used are sex, age, parents' education, pre-education, and home educational resources. To compare the performance of students who took the tests in Arabic and those who took the test in English, we will rely on the propensity score methodology to study the effect of using English as a language of instruction on students' performance in mathematics and science. The sample of students will be divided into two: a group who received the instruction in English, known as the treated group, and the group of students who received the instruction in Arabic, known as the control group. Matching allows having two groups of students that are similar with respect to demographic factors and family socioeconomic status, and only differ with respect to the language of instruction. We now present our findings. Let's start to present some descriptive statistics of science performance of students who took the test in Arabic and those who took the test in English. We do the same thing for mathematics performance for those who took the test in Arabic and those who took the test in English. Our descriptive data shows that students who took the test in Arabic outperformed those who took the test in English in both evaluations. To see whether these differences are significant, we did a regression with dummy variable for treatment, which is the same thing as doing a t-test. For science achievement, the difference is 59.5 points, which is significant at 1%, which means that receiving science instruction in English lowers the science scores by 59.5 points. For mathematics achievement, the difference is 25.2 points, which is significant at 1%, which means that receiving mathematics instruction in English lowers the mathematics score by 25.2 points. We then estimated a propensity score model. We used the matching technique to control for the potential confounding influence of pre-treatment variables such as children's age, gender, family socioeconomic status by reducing the imbalance between the treatment and control group. According to the findings, pupils who received science instruction in English will have their scores decreased by 69.6 points. Additionally, students who received their mathematics instruction in English will see their scores reduced by 33.3 points, which means that the achievement is lower at this grade when the instruction is provided in English. The differences are significant at 1% level. So, the effects of being taught in English, the second language, in science and mathematics other than Arabic, the first language, were consistently and substantially negative. So, to conclude, our results show that compared with children who did not receive English education, students with English learning experience have significantly lower chance to perform better in science and mathematics. This shows that having science and mathematics courses in English at an early age cannot improve achievement.
Now for question and answer, we'll be pinning people so that our paper presenters are here and shown and have joined us for the live Q&A. Thank you so much. And I'm going to start, I'll be doing a question to each of you so that we're being fair. I'll start off with Dr. Youssef. Doctor, does that sound like a good thing to the ears, Dr. Youssef? Okay. Can you describe Turkish makam music? And does that music also communicate knowledge? And were you able to measure that? Or is it instead that different Islamic music is better at communicating knowledge while makam is better for emotions?
By the way, Patricia, I take my notes for the questions. I prepare my answer. Sorry. I will first answer you and the question from Steve. And I have another question from Faiza about religious perspectives on using music in classrooms. If so, it's with you, I will follow this order to answer the questions.
Sure.
For my study, I'm really interested in emotion-based practice for religious education, especially for the values education dimension. This is because religious education is mostly criticized of being knowledge-oriented and suffers from having lack of emotion and behaviors adequately. These are the core aspects for attitudes, values, education, or pedagogy. Someone calls them as cognition, feeling, and behavior, or cognitive, affective, or psychomotor dimensions, or mind, body, and heart. For emotion-based approach, music is here to induce emotions. And in this point, I have to mention the makam. Makam is the term that defines the set of compositional rules, and it conceptualizes the model tonal character of Turkish and Arabic music. It's not special to my study. It is a broad concept. And for makams, there are many traditional and contemporary attributions, such as when you listen to music in the makam of Ras, you feel happy. In the makam of Neva, you feel power or courage. Or in your makam of Segah, you will have religious feelings. And for knowledge-based approach, regardless of emotional qualities, music can facilitate the communication of knowledge. For example, using music or chants or a nasheed about the Mawlid birthday of Prophet Muhammad in the right context. Emotion induction and communication of knowledge through music is not specific to Turkish music, of course. And what is the benefit of makam for this perspective is that, and of course, for the future implication is that due to the historical attributions and their experimental validation, we or RE teachers can predict the potential emotional arousal when they use the music in the classroom. And it is same for the knowledge-based approach. Then the question is, for instance, if we used Ras music in the classroom and the students feel happy, what is its value for teaching? And if we use a chant about Prophet Muhammad, it gives information to the classroom. What is its value for teaching?
I think it's powerful how you see, music as kind of being this catalyst towards identity development and working in students in relation to encouraging, allegiance to or value towards, interest in, religion. And as you said, knowledge being communicated, but also the emotions and the affinity towards. It's just an interesting aspect to think about the music's role in helping build these kind of markers of identity.
Of course, and as you mentioned, if we use a nasheed or a chant about Prophet Muhammad about his birthday, we should assume that students have at least basic knowledge about who is Prophet Muhammad, why it's his birthday is important for Muslim identity. If students, as relatively low knowledge about this, its effect will be limited.
Thank you so much. Dr. Youssef, we'll come back to you, okay? But I
Okay.
will go now for a question for Jalal. This is a question regarding the notion of active agents in the learning process. So the question is, how can teachers better engage students speaking in the classroom after it's being a flipped approach?
First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for this fruitful and this interesting symposium. That was very interesting. I am so glad that I'm participating with you in this symposium. Teachers can play a very important role by engage to make students more active agents by using good questioning technique, which I think that this is this is one of the effective way to make students talk a lot and participate a lot. And the question they should choose, they should be higher, or the questions higher, they can provoke students thinking so that they can talk a lot, and they can also minimize their talk in the classroom. So they should not dominate the classroom. They should give students more time to speak, and should not focus on students' mistakes or the way they speak. So they should let them speak, give them time to be active and be engaged more in the classroom.
Dr. Cabot, you're muted.
Yeah,
And that teachers are, open to a classroom climate in which students can question, and that they're encouraged to not make fun of the answers that are given. Thank you so much for those approaches. Now a question for Dr. Danya and your colleague. This is regarding the test taking and language. So specifically, could there be an effect on how well students learn or take the tests if the tests are in a formal standard Arabic versus being in a particular Arabic dialect?
Do you hear me?
Yeah,
do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I apologize because I have troubles in my internet connection. So I'm using different devices, different mobile devices. For the question, I picked up some questions from the QA box. So if I well understood, the question is that the students, some students are here in Arab countries, the students live in a Dialect-dominated environment, and the tests are taken in literary Arabic. So are there disadvantaged compared to other students? Is that so? Is that if I well understood the question? So sure, the children in Arab countries, so they live in a Dialect-dominated environment, but the linguistic distance between the dialect and the literary Arabic is not big. And the research has shown that mastering the first language is a process that takes a minimum of 12 years. So introducing the second language or having courses in a second language, which is in this case English, it may be problematic to those students whose native language is Arabic.
Okay, thank you so much. This question is for Dr. Fathi, and it comes from Steve in our audience regarding the e-games. Could you talk more about the culturally appropriate criteria? What were examples of elements in the games that were deemed culturally appropriate versus inappropriate? And if
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you wanted to see it, it was at 2:39 p.m. there in the chat.
Thank you for this amazing symposium. I'm very glad to be here with you. Regarding the question, we evaluated the e-games based on three main criteria. age appropriateness, individual and cultural appropriateness. And as you have seen, in the results, our e-games were not, culturally appropriate, unfortunately. The area of the cultural appropriateness, because all of these, not all of these, the majority of educational games implemented in Jordanian kindergartens, are not created by educational panels, and they are, some of them they are commercial, some of them it depends, mainly on this on each kindergarten or school to provide its children with e-games. Most of these e-games were reflected the culture of Western countries mainly, in terms of the culture over there, so that maybe our children need e-games that reflect their own Islamic and Arabic culture mainly, and that's what I suggest in the recommendation, to for the Ministry of Education to shoulder the responsibility for providing e-games that that's suitable for Jordanian culture and context,
Dr. Fathi, in your study with the e-games, are they created by the Ministry of Education, Hashemite Kingdom, or
No,
is
no.
it coming from the West?
No, not at all, actually. Again, each kindergarten has the right to, provide its children with, any e-games, available. Some of them, they go to, some like Apple Store or Google Play or something, or some commercial, plays. Some commercial plays over there. And I've noticed that our children, they are using these e-games, without being evaluated in terms of its appropriateness.
It's powerful for me to learn this from you. I've been to Queen Rania Technology Center numerous times and learning about how the ministry has used the platform of technology and games to roll out curriculum. But it's interesting how there's kind of been a going back to this commercially packaged type material. So your work is kind of at the cutting edge of saying what's the cultural relevancy of an e-game that's picking up Arabic language, nuance, culture, identity, religious identity, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Welcome.
To Dr. Youssef, a question from our audience members. How did the teachers feel about introducing music into the classroom teachings? Was there any kind of resistance experienced by the teachers to introduce music into the classrooms, due to religious beliefs? And if so, do you have any suggestions for overcoming this?
Of course. I broadly discussed the religious perspective on the music in Islamic understandings. And the question of whether music is haram or halal is broadly discussed in the literature. But I think the question and its answer is misrepresented in the literature. I call this is a barrier by which we cannot discuss adequately the role of music in Islamic philosophy, or using music in medicine, or medical practices, or using music in religious purposes. And one of the assumptions for my study is that there is one more way to discuss music in Islamic understanding. It is educational applications. And through my interviews, RE teachers are most aware of this perspective, whether music is permitted or prohibited in Islam, and they have experienced some resistance from people religiously motivated against music, and they are generally aware of the explanations why music is haram, might be haram, or in which conditions it might be permitted, and they can clearly explain the position to the Muslim people. But beyond this, some secular people from Turkey are also motivated to be against music because of their secular perspectives. They argue, if something is religious, it should have no place in education. Therefore, religious music should not be used in education. Religious motivation doesn't only explain the Islamic perspectives.
Thank you so much. Okay, a question for Jalal regarding your research in Morocco. To what extent did the flipped classroom help students achieve in the realm of grammatical knowledge and grammatical concepts?
Flipped classroom is this is an innovative pedagogy which allows students to have more time to prepare for the class. Now, when students are given the lesson content at home, they have more time to prepare and to prepare for the assigned class. So whereas in the traditional classroom, students don't have more time to understand or the grammatical concepts fully. That's how flipped classroom, I think, can be more effective in language learning than the traditional classrooms.
Great, thank you so much. I like to see this application of the flipped classroom in the Moroccan context. Dr. Danya, I have a question for you. And is there a preference in Gulf states towards English as medium of instruction in schools? Or is there a combination of English, Arabic going on, or a preference for Arabic as language of instruction?
So regarding the data that do you hear me first? Yes?
Please, go ahead. Sure, please.
Okay. Regarding the data that we have used, the descriptive statistics show that only 24% of students are enrolled in English schools. So maybe there are certain factors that behind the fact that parents enroll their children in English schools, maybe because it's prestigious, maybe because they have had education in English, and maybe they think that when for their children, if they start learning English from a very young age, they will reach high proficiency levels compared to starting at a later age, and they will get easily jobs. And we all know that for when we seek a job, and all the interviews are done in the second language in many countries all over the world. So, but for the statistics, they show that only 24% of students, they are enrolled in. So I don't think, personally, I don't think there is preference, it's my opinion, for the English instruction, because I'm using the data. So the data says that there's not a real preference for the English in schools.
It's really exciting to see this research you're doing in Bahrain and UAE and Oman and Qatar. Because as you mentioned when you open your presentation, that there's just so little that has been done and known and at least disseminated, especially in the West. So thank you so much. A question for Dr. Fathi regarding the Jordanian research. Are the e-games being used in double shift schools? So the Jordanian students being educated in the morning, Syrian refugee students in afternoon. Do Syrian students have exposure to e-games? Oops, you're muted.
Sorry, all right. The sample of my study actually doesn't include, students in double shifted schools or refugees or Syrian refugee schools. Although we have, although those students are using, technology, but in a minimum, but not when it comes to educational games. Just I targeted children in both public and private schools in order to see the quality of educational games provided for those specifically.
Was more happening with the e-games in the private schools than the public?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my sample included maybe 22 private kindergartens and only eight public schools. And those who are included in my study, implemented, educational games in their kindergarten settings,
Mhm, mhm. Thank you so much. My work has been in Jordan and Amman and 10 double shift schools.
Mm.
And students were reporting, the Syrian students were reporting about how in the afternoon shift, the library was closed. They had less access to, computer technologies. In some cases, that was true for Jordanian students as well, but just interesting. Thank you so much. We have time perhaps for one more question. And Dr. Youssef, I'll pose this one to you. I'm kind of curious just how you became interested in looking at emotion-based musical practices, how you became interested in that, for religious ed. And then if you could speak a little bit more to us about the values education approach and how that's linked to music activities.
Mhm. Well, I will start by picking the values education approaches. There are, generally speaking, two broad areas for the values education approaches. One is deductive, one is inductive approaches. For the deductive approaches, there's a kind of target list of values students are expected to reach these values at the end of education process, for which I think knowledge-based musical practice are more relevant, because the idea is to teach something through the musical activities. The other values education approaches is inductive approach, for which students are expected to reach their own conceptualizations of values. Therefore, I think emotion-based approach, emotion-based musical activities are more relevant for this perspective. If students feel, if students emotionally respond to music listening, they can use their feelings to reach and build their own values. But in practice, these approaches are not exclusive each other, and it is advised to use both approach alternately when needed. And I'm not suggesting to use one over another, but use both together in a proper context.
Thank you so much. Oh, and just finally, Dr. Fathi, there's been some engagement here in the chat regarding educational games. Are there ways in which students are gravitating more to non-educational games and that competes for their attention towards educational games? Are kids engaging even at young ages with non-educational, media?
Yeah, all right. Actually, yes, children in Jordan, they engage in non-educational games. Of course, they, go for direct play and free play, and there are, plenty of time for children to play because, children, benefit from being exposed to free play and non-educational games, as well as, they benefit from educational games. The key is we have to find the balance in order to engage children, and I believe that even educational games shouldn't replace the concrete activities like for children, because they must actually talk, walk, communicate with others, and not only do educational games.
Shukran, thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. And now with the last couple of minutes, we just want to be able to get our leadership team together here to thank you so much for being a part of day 1, day 2, and day 3 in terms of participation of audience members, of questions given in the chat, engaging with our panelists, and be appreciative of the efforts that you've taken to be involved. And we hope that you'll keep this in mind for next year, because we will certainly have our 6th annual AEMS Symposium, which will be partnership with IIIT and IU School of Education again. So that's why we appreciate the feedback you provide in the evaluations, because we take that to heart and continue work to improve. Dr. Nasser.
Yes, before we go to the evaluations, or while you, if you can multitask, I want to thank everyone again, our panelists and our audience. I want to thank you for being here, for the rich discussions and for the engagement. I want to remind everyone that the main objective really is to make sure that your presentations can be written and sent. If you've already written your transcript, please make sure that you send it to the Journal of Education Muslim Societies. This symposium is the main pipeline for our journal. Our journal is 4 years old. It's been indexed in JSTOR and in other places, and we hope to get it even more in major venues. So please expect an email from Huda, who is our GEMS managing editor, and she will be in touch with you regarding how to carry this presentation into the publication stage. We also yesterday a special session on converting presentations into manuscripts. It was the last session of the 2nd day, and maybe you want to listen to that presentation. I think she had a lot of good lessons, even for people who have been publishing in English and in mainstream journals. Take the time and look at those, and I hope to see, as the co-editor of GEMS, I hope to see your manuscripts. I hope we can help you go through the blind reviews with the 2 blind reviewers, and then get you to get your work published. It's all very important work. It's all coming from places where we're not represented in English language journals. And the areas we heard from in the 3 days we've had, it's important to have the research voices from those areas to represent your participants, to represent your communities, and to spread the word in an authentic and meaningful way. And I want to thank you again, and thank Patty and her team, IU Conferencing, and Deria for all the hard work on this symposium. Thank you all.
Thank you.